My name is Ethan Ward. Last spring, my family packed up and moved to a farmhouse just outside of Salina, Kansas. My dad had inherited the place from his uncle, a sprawling property sitting alone among what felt like endless acres of corn. Our nearest neighbor was almost a mile away. I remember those first few weeks being quiet, almost too quiet. Coming from the city, the absence of traffic, the constant hum of life, was jarring. All I could hear at night was the chirp of crickets and the rustle of the wind. But then, the whispering started. It was about 3 weeks after we'd settled in. I woke up around midnight to the sound of my window rattling. At first, I just assumed it was the wind picking up, but then I heard what sounded like voices. They were faint and soft, muffled, like someone trying to speak through a thick wall. I got out of bed, crept over to the window, and pressed my ear against the cold glass. The sound was coming from the cornfield. The words were impossible to make out, just a low, layered murmur. I remember just freezing there, my breath fogging up the window pane. That's when I saw it. A section of the corn moved, a distinct ripple that went against the grain, even though the air outside was completely still. The next morning, I tried to tell my parents about it. They just brushed it off. My dad, ever the pragmatist, said that the corn acts like a weird echo chamber when the irrigation lines shift and the water pressure changes. He said it could make all sorts of strange noises. I really wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But that night, it happened again. This time, I was ready. I grabbed my phone and started recording. When I played the audio back, my blood ran cold. The sound was much clearer on the recording. It was a rhythmic, raspy whisper, and it was repeating my name. Ethan ... Ethan ... over and over. I dropped my phone on the floor and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. A couple of days later, I drove into town to pick up some supplies. I ended up at this old, dusty gas station on the edge of town. An old man was behind the counter, and on a whim, I told him about what I'd been hearing. The moment I mentioned the whispers from the cornfield, his face went pale. He leaned over the counter and told me a story about Calvin Hale, the man who owned our land long before my great-uncle ever did. He said that during a brutal harvest storm one autumn, Calvin went out into the cornfield to fix a jammed harvester. He never came back. A search party went out, and they found the machine, still running, its massive blades slick with something dark, but there was no body. The locals started saying the field had kept him. After that, people claimed to hear voices whenever the corn grew tall, especially on still, quiet nights. I should have been terrified. I should have stayed away from that field. But a part of me, the stupid, curious part, just had to know more. That weekend, I decided to set up my dad's trail camera facing the field. I told myself I just wanted proof, something concrete to show my parents so they'd finally believe me. But if I'm being honest, I think I just wanted to know if the thing saying my name was real. The camera was pretty decent. It had night vision, motion detection, and a small audio recorder. I placed it on a fence post, aimed it directly at the spot where I'd seen the corn move, and left it running overnight. The next morning, I went out to get it, and my heart sank. The camera was on the ground, the lens cracked. I took it back to my room, plugged the memory card into my laptop, and started scrolling through the footage. The first few clips were exactly what you'd expect, just a vast, dark field swaying gently. It was almost peaceful. Then, I got to a file time-stamped at exactly 2:13 a.m. The motion sensor had been triggered. I watched as the corn in the center of the frame began to part. Not like it was being pushed by the wind, but like someone was pushing it aside from within. And then something stepped out. The image was grainy, black and white, from the night vision, but I could feel the air leave my lungs. The figure looked ... It looked like me. It was wearing the same hoodie I'd worn the day before, had the same haircut. It walked slowly, deliberately, toward the camera, and stopped just inches from the lens. Its face leaned in close until only its mouth filled the entire frame. And then it whispered, the audio peaking. "You shouldn't be here." The screen glitched, filled with static, and then went black. With shaking hands, I took my laptop downstairs and showed the video to my parents. They watched it, their faces unreadable. My dad said it must be a lighting trick, or maybe a prankster from town trespassing on our property. But the waver in my mother's voice told me she did unbelieve her own words for a second. She saw it too. That night, I locked my bedroom window, barricaded my door with a chair, and kept every single light on. The silence in the house was deafening. Around 1 a.m., the whisper returned. But this time, it was closer than it had ever been before. It wasn't coming from the field. It was coming from just outside my wall. Ethan, it was right there. I was paralyzed, completely frozen in my bed. And then I heard, it's an unmistakable sound of my window sliding up. A second later, my dad burst into my room, his eyes wide with panic. He was yelling that someone was in the yard. He grabbed a heavy flashlight from his nightstand, and we ran outside together. He swept the powerful beam across the yard and into the cornfield. The rows of corn were completely still, silent under the moonlight. We followed the beam, our feet sinking into the soft dirt, until the light landed on something lying on the ground, right at the edge of the corn. It was my hoodie, the one from the video. It was torn to shreds and covered in mud and something dark and wet. We moved out 2 weeks later. My parents couldn't sell the house, so it just sits there, empty. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm scrolling through the photo gallery on my phone, the clip plays by itself. I know I deleted it months ago. I've deleted it a dozen times. But it always comes back. And the voice is still there. A little softer each time, but always saying the same words. You shouldn't be here. Thank you for watching. If you have a story you'd like to share, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange tales. Stay safe out there. My name is Zoe Nolan. I moved into a small apartment in Portland last year after ending a long relationship. It was an old building, built in the 1940s. The kind with creaking floors and thin walls where you could hear your neighbors sneeze. I didn't have much furniture, so I started picking up cheap second-hand pieces to fill the space. That's how I found the mirror. It was a tall, vintage vanity mirror with carved wooden edges, slightly tarnished, but still beautiful. I bought it from a local antique store run by an elderly woman who didn't talk much. When I paid for it, she hesitated before wrapping it up. She said it came from an estate sale and that some things remember their owners. I laughed it off. I wish I hadn't. The first few nights were normal. I put the mirror across from my bed, near the window, and sometimes used it to do my makeup. Then, one night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a faint tapping sound. I thought it came from the window, but when I looked, the sound was coming from the mirror. Soft, rhythmic taps, like fingernails against glass. I turned on the light. Nothing. The room was empty. The next morning, I noticed something strange. The reflection in the mirror looked slightly off. My face was there, but the lighting didn't match the room. It was darker behind me, like a shadow hung in the air. I leaned closer, and for a split second, my reflection blinked a half second too late. I convinced myself I was imagining it. I had been sleeping poorly. A week later, my best friend Lily came over. We ordered pizza and decided to take selfies in front of the mirror. When we checked the photos later, her reflection looked fine. Mine didn't. My eyes in the reflection were open, wider than they should have been, the pupils blown dark. Lily noticed it first and joked that I looked possessed. I deleted the photo, but the image stayed in my head. That night, I dreamed of standing in front of the mirror again, except it wasn't my apartment. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the light was red, like the sun was dying outside. My reflection smiled, even though I didn't. I woke up sweating. The tapping sound had started again, slow and deliberate. I moved the mirror to the hallway the next day. It didn't help. I'd catch glimpses of movement in it when I walked past, but only from the corner of my eye. I even threw a sheet over it. The next morning, the sheet was folded neatly at the base, and the glass was clean, cleaner than it had been before. Lily came back a few nights later to keep me company. She said she wanted to help me debunk it. She brought her camera and suggested we record overnight to see what was happening. We set it up on a tripod facing the mirror and went to sleep in the living room. Around 4 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, bare feet on old wood. I couldn't move. When we checked the footage the next morning, my stomach twisted. At exactly 3:46 a.m., the mirror's surface rippled, like someone had dropped a stone into water. Then, my reflection stepped out of sync. It turned its head toward the camera, even though I was asleep in the other room. Its lips moved, forming words we couldn't hear. Lily scrubbed through the video, and just before it ended, the reflection smiled and lifted its hand. My reflection waved. After that, I put the mirror outside by the dumpster. 2 days later, it was gone. I assumed someone had taken it, until a week later, when I woke up to a heavy thud in the hallway. I turned on the light and froze. The mirror was back, leaning against the wall, spotless and standing perfectly upright. I moved out the next morning. I didn't even pack everything. Now I live in a newer apartment. No antiques, no old furniture. Still, sometimes at night, when I walk past my bathroom mirror, I catch something just slightly off, a delayed movement, a twitch of a smile. And once, when I covered the mirror with a towel, I heard the same soft tapping from underneath, gentle but steady, like it's still waiting for me to look again. My name is Nathan Kraus. I work the night shift at a truck stop just off Highway 97, a lonely stretch of road cutting through miles of forest and farmland. It's the kind of place most people drive past without noticing. The fuel pumps, a flickering neon sign, a diner that never really closes. The nights are long and silent, except for the hum of the coolers and the faint hiss of the radio behind the counter. 3 months ago, the radio started acting up. It was an old CB unit, left over from the previous owner, still tuned to a trucker's frequency. Most nights, it picked up nothing but static. But one night, right around 2 a.m., it crackled to life. At first, it was just noise, soft, broken, static, mixed with faint voices in the distance. I thought maybe a passing trucker was broadcasting nearby. Then I heard my name, clear and drawn out through the distortion. Nathan. I froze. The voice sounded like it came from deep inside, the static, layered and distant, but it was definitely saying my name. I grabbed the receiver and asked who it was. No response, just more static. I turned the volume down and tried to shake it off, but something about that voice stuck with me. It sounded familiar. Later that night, when I mentioned it to Sam, the cook at the diner, he got quiet. He told me about a driver named Daniel Miles, who used to stop here every night about 10 years ago. One rainy evening, Daniel took the curve past mile marker 241 to fast and went over the guardrail. His truck exploded on impact. They said his radio kept transmitting for hours after the crash, spitting out broken fragments of his last call for help. Sam told me that every few years someone claims they hear him again. I laughed at first, but the sound of that voice still echoed in my head. The next few nights were quiet until the following Thursday. The radio came alive again just after 2 a.m., same as before. This time, the voice was clearer. Nathan, you hear me? It said. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Who is this? The voice paused. Then, through the static, came the words. You were supposed to stop me. The air in the room felt heavy, pressing against my chest. I turned off the radio and unplugged it, but the sound didn't stop. It kept coming faintly from the unplugged unit, fading only when I carried it out back and left it by the dumpsters. The next day, I drove 2-mile marker, 241. I told myself it was curiosity, but something deeper pulled me there. The guardrail was still bent from the old wreck, and at the bottom of the ravine, you could still see the rusted remains of the truck buried in weeds. When I got closer, my phone started buzzing even though I had no service. The screen flickered, and a notification popped up. Voice memo received. I hadn't recorded anything. I hit play. It was the same static from the CB, and underneath it, Daniel's voice. He sounded scared, panicked. Nathan, don't go down the road tonight, please. Then silence. I drove back to the station, hands shaking the whole way. Sam said I looked pale and told me to go home early. That night, I tried to sleep, but the radio came back on, the same one I'd left outside. I found it sitting on my kitchen counter. I hadn't brought it home. The cord dragged across the floor like something had pulled it there. The voice came again, softer this time, almost pleading. It's not over yet. Come back to the road. I couldn't resist. I don't know if it was fear or something else that made me go, but around 3 a.m., I drove back out to the highway. The fog was thick, and the air smelled like wet asphalt. When I reached mile marker 241, my headlights flickered and the engine died. Through the fog, I saw a faint orange glow near the guardrail. The wrecked truck, burning quietly, even though it should have been cold for a decade. The CB radio on the passenger seat came to life again. "You shouldn't have come," the voice said. Then everything went dark. I woke up at dawn, sitting in my truck on the side of the road. No fire, no smoke, nothing but the faint smell of gasoline. When I turned the key, the engine started right away. I drove back in silence, heart pounding. Now, every night at 2 a.m., I hear the same message through the static, no matter where I am. "You were supposed to stop me." I don't know what it means, but I can't turn it off anymore. If I unplug the radio, it plays through my phone. If I mute my phone, I hear it in the walls. And sometimes, when I drive past mile marker 241, the fog thickens and I see headlights in the ravine, flashing twice like a signal, before fading into nothing. I think whatever happened to Daniel Miles didn't end on that road, and somehow, it's waiting for me to finish it.